And one of the problems that we're seeing is that Visa is basically taking this settlement to gain ground for itself. And I think that's why the judge is going, no, this doesn't look good.
So, Patty, we had a great episode today. Of course, having James Huber back on the podcast is always a good thing, and talking about all these crazy settlements that are going on.
So much legality going on, different lawsuits and settlements. And I think James did his best in trying to help us differentiate between them all and what it might mean for our listeners. So pay real close attention to some of the things he's saying, because it's going to affect your merchants, and that means it's going to affect you.
Absolutely.
And your question from the field, that was a good one there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so we just talked about upstream partners and even downstream partners. Just kind of talking about it's time to maybe reevaluate your partnerships in the industry based on the new kind of reality that we're facing. And then, Patty, give us a little bit of a spoiler alert here, I guess, on some of these trends and what.
Yeah, just some interesting trends on how businesses and consumers prefer to transact business. Cards versus checks. Let's put it that way.
Well, before we dive in here, Global Legal Law Firm is not a advertising partner or anything of those kinds. So just a great interview with an industry professional. So we're excited about that. And of course, this podcast is sponsored by Nativia, and we'll have an announcement from Vlad later on in this episode. So with that being said, are you ready to go, Patty?
Let's do it. Hey, everybody. We're here today with James Huber and Matt Luciani from Global Legal Law Firm. We're going to talk today about the proposed settlement between merchants and the card brands. It's a supposedly $26 billion payout with some other goodies. But James, if you don't mind, can you maybe get us up to speed in terms of the background of this lawsuit and this settlement?
Well, yeah, I mean, the lawsuit started, 15 years ago or something?
15 at least, right.
And just so everybody knows, I actually thought of this lawsuit first, but we didn't do it because, you would need tremendous manpower. My brother-in-law's brother actually works at the firm who pushed this thing. And yeah, here they are way later. And, I think the juice was worth the squeeze, but that took quite a bit of investment to get this thing over the line, because they fought it like crazy, and they tried to keep it really quiet too. So, now they came to a settlement because they're going, we're going to lose. But now the judge is saying, I don't really like it, guys, and wants a trial on it. So that's exciting for all of us because, the trial could go the other way. And, I think which side generally, I lean toward is the one that benefits the ISOs, the agents, and the merchants, and not so much Visa. But it could go either way, as with any trial. I have clients all the time going, I have a great case, but I'm going, look, if we're going to a trial, it's 50-50. I don't care how good your case is. So,
right.
I'm amazing, but,
Right.
I can still say, it's 50-50. I don't know if the judge, how the jury will feel. So we're at a position right now where I don't think it's going to settle.
Okay. But let's just pretend for a moment that it will, in terms of maybe even not that. I guess basically what I'd love for you to do is maybe talk about the particulars of the settlement.
Sure. So
it's more than just money, right?
Yeah, I mean, is anything more than money? But
I mean, cash in the hand, right?
Right. So there's a big, they're supposed to put a pool of funds into an account that merchants can go claim. And there's all sorts of websites for merchants to sign up and do this, but you really have to dot your T's and cross your I's. Other way around.
Yeah. Other way around. Yes.
Other way around. Yeah. So we've actually defended a couple companies who were doing these class settlements because they were doing it according to the plaintiff's counsel wrong. So it's a haul. And the idea is when you settle these things, you say, okay, it's $36 billion, but what you're actually only going to end up paying is 5 because people aren't going to opt in. You get these notices, I get them all the time, hey, Verizon, whatever, you're entitled to 5 cents. I'm not going to do it. So, but if everybody did it, that would end up being, maybe $100 million, but people don't. Here, supposedly the amounts are looking up pretty good. Like a couple merchants are people are getting like a few $1,000. So that's probably worth filling out the form or whatever. And then on top of it, Matt's looked at the particulars that are in there. So I'll turn it over to Matt Luciani.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some
Thank you,
other
Matt.
things related to equitable relief that's on the table, like surcharging. Those rules would have to be changed a little bit. They're talking about that merchants would be allowed to surcharge between 1% and 3%. That's something that's been discussed in general for various reasons anyway. But if the other card brands don't continue to enforce their restrictions because they have more of like piggyback rules, the other card brands like Discover and American Express versus MasterCard and Visa, it's more express that you can't do it. So because of those piggybacking rules, it's sort of like all or nothing, right? So if merchants start surcharging, they'll suddenly be able to do it across all of the 4 major brands and then some of the other brands as well. That should increase competition in that space and also give merchants some more innovative products potentially. But the biggest one perhaps is related to digital wallets and some of the steering arrangements that they're trying to eliminate. So 2 of the big digital wallets are PayPal and Apple Pay right now, of course. And one of the things with the steering arrangements that Visa has with these companies is that if you connect your debit card directly to your digital wallet, it gets processed quicker. But on the flip side of that, if you were to just connect it to your bank account, the merchant would be paying lower fees because they wouldn't be charging the interchange and all that other kind of stuff. So that's one of the other things that they're looking to eliminate.
And one of the problems that we're seeing is that Visa is basically taking this settlement to gain ground for itself. Like they're putting in the surcharge cap that we're also hot and bothered about, and they're putting in there because the first settlement that was reached in this case was, look, as part of this, the merchants have to be able to offset their fees. And we all know that a 3% rate is not going to offset the fees. So they're doing all sorts of things to gain ground in here. And I think that's why the judge is going, no, this doesn't look good. And look, the plaintiff's attorneys, they've been doing this for 15 years. Now, granted, they've gotten payments along the way. They want to see this thing settled. And so do all of the advocacy groups, like the people that have spent the last 2 years or longer getting people signed up for this. They're going, I want my check too. So there's people fighting to get this thing done. But I think I don't know the judge personally or anything, but I have to give them kudos here because I think they're going, no, this is unfair. And, but the settlement, it won't be, or if it goes to trial, the verdict won't have those things in it. The verdict will be, here's money and here's maybe a little bit of how you have to operate, but they're never going to task a jury to be like, well, what do you think the surcharge rules are going to be?
Right. Now, does it also have a cap on interchange proper, James, or am I conflating that with something else?
No, it does. They said they can't raise it above a certain rate for 3 years.
It's
For 3
only
years?
there's a limitation on how long though, and I mean it's like 4 basis points, something like that. So when you're talking about the grand scheme of last year alone, there was over $172 billion derived in swipe derivative fees, whether that's the brand fees or the interchange fees. So how much does 4 basis points really put a dent into that?
And it doesn't cover all the other fees, right? They're just saying interchange. So,
which I thought, I actually thought that was one interesting thing, which I was like, when I first read through a draft, I was like, did I miss something where it was like, they limited the interchange, which is charged by the issuing, collected by the issuing banks largely, but it didn't say anything about card brand fees. Right. So
Right.
Visa
And
and
that's why
MasterCard can still,
MasterCard immediately went out and raised its one of its fees.
right.
Yeah.
That's how they're going to recoup, right, James?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, look, the issuers, they're still rolling in it. So I don't think they care all that much. Because
Right.
like you said, they're getting most of the interchange and they don't
Right.
do anything except for prop up our entire economic system. But other
Hey,
than
but
that,
other than that,
yeah.
other than that, Mrs. Lincoln. Um, okay, so what about the first half of you briefly mentioned the first half of the settlement. This is a huge lawsuit that part of it was settled, what, like 5 years ago? And now they're trying to, tackle the rest of it. There was a pool of funds there that you discussed about how there are a bunch of websites out there helping merchants get that money. How much money are we talking about that's supposedly allocated, and what's the deadline for applying for those funds?
You know how much money's in there?
Yeah, it's like 50 billion, something along those lines from the top of my head. But they have until August of this year to claim that.
Okay.
And that only
Right.
covers merchants from 2004 to 2019. There's a list of plaintiffs that had opted out of that settlement. There's a list of plaintiffs that opted out of the class action altogether. So those people don't have a
Right.
right to those funds, right? A lot of merchants stayed on, obviously. That's why we have this second proposed settlement.
So, can
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
one thing that maybe would be helpful for me, and I would assume for our listeners as well, is there's been all these different like settlements and stories come out. It's starting to get a little confusing. So are we talking about, so again, what they can, apply for by August 30th, I think it was, that was my understanding is that was like a $5.5 billion settlement. And then there was like a new one that was this kind of 30 billion-ish number. What's the difference? Are you saying that the first one isn't fully finalized and that's the one that's going to go to court? Or like, give me a little more context here of these different lawsuits. I feel like I may be missing something, or maybe they were just broken up or something.
yeah. They were
Look at
broken up,
them
I
as
believe.
different lawsuits.
Okay.
Because when the class action happens, there's certain requirements related to typicality, damages, other kind of legalese, nuances, and then there's also fairness hearings on the settlements. So what happens essentially is that first group of merchants, they're okay with it. And that's typical across that class. And then there's the people who stayed on and continued to litigate it. And I think that here's where there becomes more nuances, is this isn't just Visa and MasterCard at the end of the day who are defendants. It's all of the banks too, or a lot of banks at least. So they're
Right.
involved in the settlement as well. It's not like it's just all coming out of Visa and MasterCard's pocket. We'll see eventually what percentages of the total settlement are attributed to Visa and MasterCard. And I would expect to see some combination of the current class plaintiffs still maybe wanting to push this proposed settlement from March along, whereas a lot of the big trade organizations and some of the bigger merchants probably
Right.
still will want to take it to trial. And as James mentioned, the problem with trial then becomes it's probably going to be a less equitable verdict. It's probably going to be more favorable to the merchant or more favorable to the card brands than it currently is, right? As
Right.
opposed to in a proposed settlement, there's probably somewhere a little bit more in the middle, but from both of our interpretation and even the judge's interpretation right now, this current proposed settlement is very pro card brand.
And again, when you
Yes.
say this current proposed settlement, we're talking about the one that merchants have already started applying for. They can apply for through August 30th, or we're talking about something different.
That's already a settlement,
That's what I thought.
right?
That's why I was
So
more
to
confused.
differentiate the two.
But only up until 2019.
Right. Right. Okay. All right. I think I got it now. So, okay.
So this is a separate lawsuit then? I mean, is it a separate lawsuit, or is it just the second half of the lawsuit? That's
The
James
second half.
Huber is shaking his head Yes, for
Yeah.
those who are not on video.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's the same lawsuit as the second half, and that's not uncommon in class actions, like
Okay.
Max said, as you settle these things in tiers.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. That
Got
makes a
it,
lot more
got
sense.
it.
Okay.
That
So-
makes a lot of sense.
So now let's talk about our audience. So ISOs, agents, right? What should they be doing about this latest settlement other than just staying in the loop and assuming that this settlement were to go through, which now it sounds like maybe it won't. Maybe it's going to go to trial. But let's say that settlement did go through. Is there any money to be made by ISOs and agents, or is this more of a, hey, help your merchants out? Like, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's more help your merchants out. Like I said, people contact us all the time saying, how do I get my money? And I send them to one of these people.
Right.
Or honestly, so I just Google it because
Right.
you can't, the fraudsters have already been shaken out, and they won't get the money. Because you
Right.
have to be, you have to register as, what do they call those people? The class settlement, whatever.
Mhm.
The members of the
Websites
class,
and
right?
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's class registered websites too.
So,
Okay.
go wherever and sign your merchants there. But I think we were discussing, there is a way, those companies, I think they'll give you an override too. I
Yeah.
don't totally
that's-
know.
Yeah.
I guess I
so
missed
like,
the plus on that because we're just like sending them off.
yeah, no, we had
Yeah.
collectively on recently, and they're one that has worked with ISOs and agents that does that. Lewis, can't remember his last name, but we had Lewis on here talking about that. So yeah, there are different companies that will, they're taking a small cut or whatever and then sharing that with the ISOs and agents. And so it sounds like there'll be, I mean, if I'm understanding it right, like I guess this is another good question, I guess. So with this first half of the settlement being the 5.5 billion, now the second half being like this 26 to 36 billion number, but is a lot of that kind of like a non-financial, non-cash in hand type settlement, or is it really like, wow, there's going to be a lot more money if this second part goes through for the average merchant?
I don't think it'll be more money because it's a shorter period. I think it's just,
Oh, I see.
Lumping it all, kind of looking at it in the aggregate a little bit and just making, I mean, it's just it's a made up number that they settle on. And then 1/10 of that they actually have to pay out. So,
Right.
I think there will be a separate pool. But probably what happens here is, this probably does go to a trial because if the judge is saying you guys can't settle it on these terms, I can't imagine the back and forth. And
Right.
it sounds like our side had to just keep giving ground. And the judge is saying this is not going to work. So. As far as the agents, I mean, look, I would keep your head on a swivel. We know that surcharging and all of that is, a hot issue for everybody. I think we've already discussed what we're doing about that. But, if this comes down and, judge order says, this is the way they're going to be doing it and these are what their rules are. I think that will, certainly affect everybody. Speaking with, Rob Johnson from Visa, he's saying one of the things that they're really doing to help people out, even though they just cut out, capped or surcharging, is they're going to rewrite the Visa rules. And that will affect everybody. I think that they're probably waiting for this to go down. But he was saying, I'd love to redo the Visa rules so that you're not reading through them and, all of a sudden you're only talking about the Crimea region or, Western Australia.
Yes, right.
So
I talked to Rob about
right.
that as well a few weeks ago as we were working on some things. And I feel like it's just so complex. It'd be nice to get some simplification and clarification,
It would, and it'd be nice to, maybe get those recognized by a court because, I think I've complained to you guys all the time. I'll walk into a judge and be like, they're violating the Visa rules. And they're like, why aren't they in jail? And I was like, well, Visa can't put anyone in jail yet. So,
right. Right. Yeah.
But they can put you in credit card hell.
they can make it so they can put you out of business. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure,
Right.
for sure. What about some of the other legal quagmires that the brands are involved with right now? I mean, there are some other things going on at the federal level as well as at the state level, correct?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot going on. We're seeing, the plaintiff's attorneys us, occasionally being one of them, they're getting smarter about the card brands. So we're seeing cases pop up naming Visa for sex trafficking, because they were processing the payments for these companies, and, they knew, and, the attorneys that are doing it so far, they don't seem to really understand how it works, because they're saying, Visa approved this for the account. And we know that Visa doesn't do that.
Right.
But we also know that Visa probably knew that they're processing payments for, nefarious characters, just like they know they're processing for, people selling marijuana. So
That's what I was just going to say. Yeah, they're processing for pot shops, even though they say they're not, right?
yeah, so that's coming up, and I think that will shine the spotlight that I think Visa tries to hide from. So that'll be those will be interesting to see if they, people can figure them out. The other thing that we're seeing is, just like the plaintiffs' attorneys are getting more educated, the FTC and the DOJ are going after people. There's a case,
Right.
it's chargeback surety, where they popped these guys because they're just running, ultra high risk merchants, and now they're looking at jail time potentially, because the massive fraud. The FTC has had their thumb on people forever, but the FTC is a for-profit organization that likes getting settlements, so nobody.
Right.
Well, actually, some of them went to prison. I mean, a few people have gone to prison for it, but
Yeah,
not
a few
for very
people have
long.
gone to prison. Not a lot, but a few.
Tennis prison, where you're allowed to leave at night.
It's more of a joint action with the DOJ.
Yeah.
Right. So what about, are there any other things that you guys are seeing, as you're obviously super connected right now with the ISO world and what's happening with the card brands? Anything at the state level? There's been some talk about interchange, there's got debit routing, you have all these other things going on. Are there any things that are really hitting your radar that you feel like our audience should be aware of right now?
Yeah, I mean, here, one big thing that we're seeing is that we're seeing states pop up with surcharging and cash discounting rules that mirror Visa and Mastercard's rules. So, we're over here loving it for our case, because we're saying that Visa is a state actor, because they, work in, with the states to make their rules. And we're going, well, look, their rules are exactly the same, and they spent how much on lobbying?
It's absurd, like millions and way more than any other organization in the payment
On
process.
lobbying.
Right,
So we're like, they're spending the lobbying, they're getting these rules changed. How are they not a state actor? Because they look the same. But my concern is that plaintiffs' attorneys are going to pick up on these and go secret shop themselves and start popping merchants that are cash discounting or surcharging. And that settlement is not, that fine is not the Visa 1,000, 5,000, 20,000. That's probably more, because you've got, shady plaintiffs' attorneys shaking people down. So my concern is that
So they're shaking people down. Let me just back up for a second. In terms of plaintiffs' attorneys are going after individual merchants that are cash discounting and surcharging. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you could go in and you could, I haven't seen it happen yet, but they could go in under California's, I think, goes into place late July or early August. You could go in and, have a shopper and then class action them all for, everybody who's been in here since, middle of July, and there's statutory fines in there. So that's, I would really be going at merchants of, make sure your cash discounting and your surcharging is done the right way. I mean, I'm going around speaking to people and they're still saying, we're not worried about it. We charge 4% across the board for cash, check, all of this. That's compliant, right? And I have to go, I'm so sorry, it's not. I think it is, but Visa says it's not.
Right. Whether it should be is a different question, but it's not. Right. So that's
Right.
Yeah. That California law was pretty, I just read it myself recently for the first time, and it was like, yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of wiggle room in that one.
No, and that one's California too. So there are a lot of plaintiffs' attorneys here.
Yeah.
California
And
and
what
New York
exactly
are
is
the most like.
Maybe you could just explain for our audience what the California law is, James.
Yeah, it's a cap, 3% surcharge. You cannot surcharge a debit card. you can do cash discounting, that's fine. I mean, it's the same exact thing as Visa. Now, the problem, I say this to everybody, and I'm like, how do you differentiate on the debit? And they're like, it's no problem. The machine picks it up. It's not going to pick up brand new cards, though. So I can go around and get my brand new debit card and look, you surcharge my debit.
Right.
Okay, and we also have states that are taking the, issue with interchange itself, right? Like the idea of Illinois, I believe. You can't charge interchange on sales tax or tips.
Yeah, we've seen a couple. Well, we had one big win. I was talking to Fiserv's senior counsel. They won in that Washington case, which was that they were trying to tax the processors on interchange. And they're going, we don't collect the interchange. And they're like, well, we technically collect it, but it's not ours. We shouldn't be taxed on it. And they're right. And so, I was talking to the council. I'm like, well, you're screwed because you're in front of a judge who's going, wow, the state's about to make, an extra multiple $1 billion. You better come down on this the right way. But the judge didn't. So, that was a big win because that would have just cost the ISOs and the merchants, because Fiserv's not going to eat that fee. They're just going to pass it on.
Right.
So Illinois is a problem because, they're saying you can't you can't charge interchange on sales tax. So I'm going, it's not the most complicated thing in the world, but I'm going to have to run potentially 3 separate transactions. So let's say I want to surcharge it. I have to run the transaction. Then I have to run the sales tax separately and eat that cost. And then if I wanted to surcharge, I would have to run the 3 of them together because I want to surcharge the sales tax too, which I think would be okay, but maybe not according to Visa.
Right.
So that's a nightmare, and that will just cost everybody money. And I don't really get it, what they're doing. I mean, I get it in theory, but in practice, it's like, I think we've talked about the, Credit Card Competition Act is like, no, this is bad legislation because you guys don't understand how it works, and it's not going to benefit anybody.
Right.
When I read the Illinois law, what struck me is it seemed like they would almost need a separate bin just for the sales tax.
I think you would. And look, I going, oh, it's not that hard, but I can't go program my machine to, run those things. I mean, I know our clients can, but to that degree, it's something that we try and blast stuff out. We appreciate what you guys do because our clients get these ideas from this because there's potentially a humongous opportunity in Illinois if this sticks of going around. Hey, we're, the compliant source, or maybe you're going and advocating to the governor and saying, look, we're the only ones that can do this, make us your guys.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, there's definitely a lot of crazy things happening right now in the industry, and James, I think we always kind of talk about Global Legal Law Firm as the law firm that's helping the ISOs, that representing the ISOs interests, and not afraid to kind of go up against Visa and some of these things. And so for those who are listening to all of this and saying, hey, I'm concerned with this or I'm concerned with that, they want to learn more about your practice, potentially working with you guys, where would you send them to learn more about your firm?
Over to our website, globallegallawfirm.com. We also have a podcast that's
very good,
probably the second best podcast in the space.
Only because James and I have each been on it, but
well, I mean, we were like number 10, but you guys came on and we bumped it up. So I think you find that on our website too. That's called the Payments Expert Podcast. You can find that on wherever you find stuff too. Then of course you can email me. It's jhuber, Huber @attorneygl.com.
Love it. James, guys, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Appreciate all the insights that you shared with us. And I'm sure we'll have you back on here soon to talk about the developments here as these continue to move forward.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. I'm back here with my friend, Vlad Sadovsky. We just got done with the SCAA, and Vlad has another exciting announcement for us for those that have the professional card. What do you got for us today, Vlad?
Well, James, you're not going to believe this, but as Nativa runs the promotion, Panthers are right there with them. They just made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. So Panthers keep winning. Nativia keeps having a box at the Panthers games. And we are continuing our ride along with Panthers for the Stanley Cup. We want the cup. And to see it live, there's no other better way to do it but on the Panthers Arena at Panthers AmeriWalt Arena. We have the box, we have the booze, we have the food, we have everything you can wish for, plus the good time to enjoy the Panthers Stanley Cup Final. Yes, we don't want to give it to Canadians. We don't want to give it to Edmonton Oilers. We got their second time in a row. So we are inviting for you guys to spend and enjoy along with us the Stanley Cup Finals in Florida.
Awesome. And I think the link for this is if we go to nativia.com/game on. So it's just all lowercase, all one word, nativia.com/game on. There's a bunch of different things here. Of course, you have the cars that you're giving away and all these other prizes. For those that maybe are newer to the podcast, we're talking about the Nativia Professional Card, which is specifically created for payments professionals. Whether you're an ISO, you're an agent, you're an executive, you're an employee at a payment processing company, go check it out. So you can get the card by going to nativia.com/professional. But this game that you have going on right now with the points and the rewards, go to nativia.com/game on and check it out. Thanks so much, Vlad.
Thank you.
So, Rich, I think one of the kind of elusive things to agents in our industry is this idea of a one-call close. Obviously, we don't close every merchant like that. Some merchants need a more complex solution or there's a demo involved or whatever. But for a lot of these mom and pop shops and smaller merchant accounts, we can absolutely walk in, close the deal, and get it done in one call. And so I want to talk to you about this because I believe you're kind of the master of the one-call close, somewhat out of necessity, I think, with just the area that you cover in the territory, So maybe share, first of all, the possibility of this. What percentage of your deals are one-call close? How do you kind of know, hey, this is somebody that maybe is going to be a one-call close? So give us a little context for that, and then we'll dive into some specific tips.
Yes. So when we walk into a business, we have to have the mindset that we are there to help them that day. So the decision to close a merchant is when we walk into the business. So if we go in and we're thinking, okay, I'm just going to present them and I'll give them my card and hopefully they'll call me later, that doesn't work. But if we go out with a sense of urgency, and this goes back to what we talked about before, I'm helping a bunch of businesses in the area today, and we're setting that tone. This is what I'm doing out here today. I've been helping a bunch of businesses in the area. And then I'll give examples. Some of the people we're helping are using Brand X or Square or whatever company it is. And we have a couple new programs that we're allowing them to take advantage of today going forward. So I'm setting those words and using phrases like that from this day forward, from now on, today. This is what's going to happen today. And then what you want to do as you're presenting a merchant, you want them to visualize having our program already. And you can ask questions like, I see you have the old equipment right over there. We have ours. Yours is on the Ethernet. Which would you prefer, Wi-Fi or Ethernet? Oh, I'd like to have it on Wi-Fi. Do you like the idea that you can move it? Or yes, we do. So now they're visualizing having the program already. And we'll talk more about this when you get down to the end. The answers are yes, 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 all the way down to the end. And when you get down to it, it's called assuming the close. Yeah. Which is very important.
Yeah, I love that. And I think a couple things you just hit on that I want to go back to here. One of them is something I actually learned from Tom Hopkins way back in the day, which was the idea of what he calls ownership questions. And so it's the idea of talking about the details. I think too many salespeople, Rich, they zoom out, right? And they get all like, oh, do you want this service? And they're very big picture. Whereas the people that actually sell, it's usually a conversation where they walk in and it's kind of like, I'm here to help you. We're going to get you set up. Let's talk about the details.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. It's much simpler. So one question I do have for you though, give us some sense for expectation wise, when you're going out in the field and over the course of, let's say, a month, what percentage of your deals, so you're probably writing 20, 25 deals a month. What are you expecting? What percentage of those are going to be a one-call close versus you're going to have to go back or call them again or something like that?
So for me, that's my whole way of thinking. I'm going to say 90% plus are people that I'm writing up are one-call closes. And
Wow.
that's what I expect out of myself. And when I get down to and when I get down to the end, and that's what amazes me about this business. And think about this, and this is what we train people to do. Imagine if you can get to the point where you can go anywhere in this country, this wonderful country that we live in, a town that you've never been into before, meet someone for the very first time. This is trust right here. That's why it's so important to be sincere and genuine. And when you walk in 25 minutes later to an hour later, they're giving you all their information because they're saying to you, James, I like you. I like what you have to offer. I believe you. I trust you. And that's what we're doing. So just getting to that point of
Wow.
being able to do that, now you have freedom. You're in charge of your complete destiny. You have absolute freedom. But
Right.
it's a great opportunity. It's just going out there and just having that mindset. I present, I'm not a pushy guy. I mean, for those of you that know me, I'm genuine, I'm sincere, I believe in what I'm doing. I'm selling the story. I get down to the end, and we never miss a presentation in the end. We're actually missing them most of the time in the beginning,
Right.
or as we're going through, because people will say, well, I keep missing them in the end. When we review what's going on, we find out it's something that they're doing along the way.
Right.
So if you're
Right.
getting, we have to think about it, or I got to talk to my partner, or I don't make decisions overnight, which I still get.
Right.
I'm still going to get that. I'm going to miss presentations. But if I follow exactly how the program works, I'm going to find that I'm going to close the majority of them if they're the right merchant. Now, again, going back to what we've talked in previous calls, don't waste time. We're not in the convincing business.
I love
The
that.
time you waste with the wrong people stop you from being with the right merchant. I've done a bunch of classes on that. You could be in there convincing, banging your head up against the wall. Meanwhile, you got Joe's Auto Repair down the road saying, man, this state, we're paying too much money, and then you miss them.
Right.
So we're missing time with them when we're spending time with the wrong people.
I love it. Yeah, to some extent, sales is always a numbers game. I
Yes.
feel like you have to play the numbers game, but then it's like when you do get in front of the right merchant, you have to have a program that's going to work. You have to have a presentation that's going to work. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Let's dig in a bit more. So you talked about the opening already and the importance of setting the stage for the opening, right? How do you transition? And this was always a challenge even for me. I feel like I was probably doing 30 to 40% one call close. And for me, I feel like usually where I would lose it was that transition between I had a really good opening, I had a really good finish and presentation, but how do you get from the opening to then slide right into those details? How do you bridge that gap?
Yes. Yeah. Great point. The best salespeople are the best listeners, as we know.
Mm,
Sometimes people have the mentality that, hey, I have the gift of gab. I can go sell ice to an Eskimo. Where the reality is, those type of people have the least amount of success. So we have to learn our script, but we have to learn to listen to the merchant to find out
mm,
what's going to be the best program for them. For some representatives that are out like, I'm just cash discount. That's all I'm selling. I don't care what they say, where that program's great, but it's not for everybody. So we have to go in. How do we find out what their needs are? We have to find out through questions. So when I'm giving my opener, I'm getting that small talk going. How long you've been in the area, how long you've been in business, and then finding out what are you currently using right now. And they might say, well, we have this company. Okay, well, as a matter of fact, the majority of the people that I've been helping out have that same exact program. And the way we've been helping them, I use a lot of third person
mm,
because typical salespeople are going to go in and say, you got to get rid of that company. They stink. And you don't use those tactics. That doesn't work at all. But if you have a completely different philosophy, this is why merchants love about us. And you
mm.
give examples with that. So you're finding out what their pain points are, and then you listen to that. And then based on what they're saying, whether it's I don't want to pay for processing. I want to pay for processing. I just want to lower my fees. You find out and you just shake your head up and down and you listen to them.
Mm.
And then you compliment them on that. So I'll tell you what, it's wonderful to see a business that's staying on top of their business. I got to take my hat off to you. You guys are doing a great job. So when you recognize people, when you give them a pat on their back, now you're getting a nice comfort zone. You got a good rapport going. So as soon as I find out where they're at, I don't walk in with any books or anything like that. The only thing I want them is meeting is me. And I'll say, I'll tell you what, let me run out to my car real quick, James. I'm going to grab my book or whatever you're presenting. Some of you, I'm old school. I have a book. Some of you got your iPads and everything. But let me grab my book. I'm going to show you exactly the different programs that we're helping everybody in the area. And I'll show you exactly how a merchant can qualify to get on this program today. And you notice I'm using that word today.
Yeah.
And that's how I slide into it. And then when I come back in, little bit of small talk, you know, how long you guys been in business, build them up, get a little rapport going again, and then present the program that's going to benefit them. You don't have to have a long, drawn out presentation. I think salespeople tend to talk too much and they talk the merchant out of it.
Yep.
You know, find out. There's some merchants that'll say, "This is great. I want to take it." Yeah, but how do I get started? You're like, "Hold on, I still got 20 more pages of my pitch." So don't do that, because you talk them right out of it. Know when to close them, and just listen to the merchant. Be sincere. Be genuine. Help the merchant, and you're going to find if you do that from the beginning, everything flows together.
Yeah, I love it. Rich, this has been so helpful. I think it's so interesting having this conversation. I think, you know, if the fact that, you know, you're not convincing the merchant, the ones you're finding that are the right merchant, you know, and you're closing those sales, 90% of your closes are going to one call close. That's a pretty incredible stat. And I love the advice that you've given today. So before we let you go, though, definitely share with us, excuse me, your information on how new agents in this industry can reach out to you. Maybe they have started in the industry, but they're not getting the support that they want, and they really want to coach. They want somebody that can mentor them. Talk about that a little bit and share how they can reach out to learn more.
Absolutely. Stories we're hearing all the time, and no knock at any other merchant service companies. If you're in the merchant service industry, it's a great opportunity. We've helped representatives that were struggling, writing a couple a month, and now they're writing 10 a month, 12, 15 a month. And it's just kind of fixing a couple little things that are going to take them to that next level. We're constantly teaching, constantly learning. So if you're that type of representative, I'm really happy to help. As you know, that's my passion. 904-434-4635. Email me, payrock, Payroc, payrock Rich Norton at gmail.com. Happy to help, happy to get on a call with you and get to know you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rich, for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, James, you know, Americans, especially younger adults, are all about speed, flexibility, and convenience, especially when it comes to payments. And they seem to prefer services offered by non-banks. A new survey from the Fed reveals the use of digital wallets products developed by non-banks surged 32% last year vis-a-vis 2022, outpacing growth of mobile apps and debit cards.
Wow.
Now, continuing the trend that began during the COVID pandemic, e-commerce continues to grow, accounting for 15% of all U.S. retail commerce, up from 6% 10 years ago.
You know what's crazy about that, Patty? I had to pause you there because if you would have told me 10 years ago that it was going to go from 6% to 15%, I would have said you were nuts. Like, no, it's going to go from 6% to 60%. Like, you know what I mean? It is interesting to me how as you get a little older, you start to realize that when all these big things pop up, things don't actually change. You know, looking back at things, it seems like things change quickly. But when you're actually in business and you're making strategy, things actually don't change that fast.
No, like here's the other side of what I was going to talk about is how fraud remains a key factor influencing choice and a key differentiator for payment services providers. You know, more than half of consumers surveyed said they had concerns around fraud. 16% of those use mobile or digital payment options and have encountered fraud in the past year. And they say they want their payment services providers to take the lead in mitigating fraud. And here's something curious, though. This is what I thought was really interesting. The Fed did two different surveys, one of consumers and one of businesses. And, you know, the business stuff said, oh, yeah, man, we love taking electronic payments. But according to the Association for Financial Professionals, they prefer also to write checks.
Yep.
And believe it or not, checks remain the fraudster's most common instrument of fraud.
Wow, really? Seems
Yeah.
like that's a pretty strong incentive to move away from checks, you know?
Very strong incentive.
Yeah.
And about 1 in 5 companies said they had fraud due to mailing checks. So fraud in the, people breaking into those blue boxes that checks are mailed through,
Yeah.
or just absconding with letters that look like they're checks that are, being delivered in the postal guy's bags, right?
Right. Right.
And even more mind-blowing, though, is 70% of U.S. firms that use checks said they have no intention of changing that.
You know, Patty, it's so interesting you bring this up. Our company has been hit with fraud very regularly for the last, I don't know, 8 months. I feel like it's really kind of started to take off as our company's grown. And it's been interesting, like educating my team on it, but there are so many times where we get hit where one of the employees will forward an email to me from some company, where what'll happen is, somebody in our finance department, they'll get an email from one of our employees, right? That will say, hey, I need to change the bank account where my payroll is being deposited. Like that's a real common one. But I was preparing our team the other day. I was talking to one of our main finance people, and I was telling her like, hey, get ready for the email that's going to come through from one of our vendors that we already know, telling you with an invoice and telling you to mail a check to them that has an attached video that's me saying to pay it. Because I said that'll happen in the next 2 years for sure with AI, right? So it's like,
Sure.
It'll look like me, it'll sound like me. So I think it's just super interesting. Like, I think all this is getting more, robust. And again, I think the check is it's a lot easier to say, mail me a check or, whatever. Like it's just an easier form of fraud. It's because all you have to do is hack a person. You don't have to hack a system to do that.
That's right. All you have to do is, send one bogus email. What is that called? The business email compromise, I think.
Yeah, well, or better yet, send 1 million and one of them is going to send you $50,000. So
right.
You know what I mean? It's crazy.
Yeah.
So very interesting stuff.
Yeah, that just really blew my mind. I also have a few statistics here I wanted to share, because Forbes magazine has published these statistics on use of business credit cards. 29% of businesses sought funding via business credit cards in 2022. And just under 5% said they use credit cards to kickstart their businesses.
Interesting.
And obviously quick access to funds was the key motivator.
Yeah, of course.
And 91% said they would recommend that others use cards when embarking on a new business venture.
Yeah, well, and again, it's an easy way to gain access to quick funds. There's no doubt that getting access to funds as a new business is not easy.
Yeah, it's not. And that's why, most businesses, about 90%, have at least 3 credit cards.
Right. Yep. Very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, it's sort of like, it reminds me of something that a cash manager said to me one time. He said, companies like to collect money at the speed of light, but they prefer to disperse it by dog sled.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, good stuff, Patty. Thanks for keeping us up to date on all these trends, and I'm sure you'll continue to do that. So.